This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to the July edition of 1 Month to a Better Compliance program. This month, we're going to focus on 1 month to better internal controls. This month's sponsor is Workiva, and first I'd like to have a word from our sponsor.
Thanks, Tom. Workiva delivers a modern internal control solution that connects risk and internal control information across the enterprise. The Wdesk Cloud Platform is collaborative, powerful, and intuitive, and optimizes documentation, testing, approval, and reporting processes. The platform is proven to increase productivity and drive better decision-making, and is used by more than 2,800 organizations worldwide for financial reporting and ICFR processes. To learn more, visit www.workiva.com.
Over the next month, I'm going to explore several topics related to internal controls. We're going to take a look at what internal controls are and how they relate to a best practices compliance program. I'm going to help you understand how to design an internal controls regime for compliance, and then some of the specific internal controls for the functional disciplines within a corporate compliance program. We're going to take a look at the COSO 2013 framework around internal controls and explain how that integrates into your best practices compliance program. I think it'll be a fascinating month for you. We'll certainly explore the area of internal controls in depth. This podcast, 1 Month to a Better Compliance program, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 8, Gap Analysis. A gap analysis is a method of assessing the differences in performance between a business's information systems Day 8, Gap Analysis. An internal controls gap analysis is a method of assessing the differences in performance between a company's internal controls to determine whether business requirements are met, and if not, what steps should be taken to ensure they are met. A gap analysis is mainly a determination of your conformance of your organization to the requirements as set forth in your internal controls requirements. That could be the COSO framework, or it could be some other basis. A gap analysis documents, or is a document review, a sort of show me the evidence type of activity, which will come in the form of records or documentation. During a gap analysis, there is a very minor audit being done. Rather, key owners or project stakeholders will provide evidence that they may or may not have met the requirements set forth in the internal control specifications you have chosen. Gap analysis are usually conducted at the beginning of a journey by a company seeking to follow a chosen specification, in other words, the COSO standard. However, it can also be conducted after some development has taken place. The main reason why a gap analysis is conducted at the beginning of a development phase or after some development has occurred is because the organization wants to know where they stand in regard to meeting the COSO standard, and they want to know what specifically they need to do to close those gaps. Basically, they want to know what the holes are, whether there are many or few, and what they need to do to close those holes to get closer to fully meeting the requirements of a COSO standard. Any exercise that involves comparing the present state of your internal controls with a conceptual or desired future state with the objective of closing the gap can also be called a gap analysis. Imagine a situation where you are asked to improve the performance of a particular component of your organization, i.e. compliance. You have no clue whatsoever as to what set of factors is the real cause of degraded performance you've been asked to improve. Identifying the gap between what is expected and what you are delivering, that's the difference between the current state and the future state. This is one way to consider what is a gap analysis. As far as a business definition is concerned, gap analysis can be defined in a number of ways, which more or less point to the same meaning. Number one is the process through which a company compares its current or actual performance of its internal controls to the expected performance to determine whether it's meeting the objectives and using its resources effectively. Number two, it is a technique that businesses use to determine what steps need be taken in order to move from the current state to desired future states. From both definitions, it is evident that a gap analysis is a technique which can be used to help a business reach its peak eventually. By defining and analyzing gaps, a project team can create an action plan to move forward and fill internal control gaps. If you dig further, you will see a gap analysis is not simply a one-step process. It involves generally 3 steps, which could sometimes be proved to be somewhat time-consuming and tedious if the improvements are not clear. So what are these 3 steps? Accurately defining the required changes and future goals. If you're not clear about your goals around internal controls, all your efforts will be in vain. The first and foremost thing to be done is to identify what the goals of the business are in the form of your internal controls and the changes needed to achieve these goals. If the goal is not clear, the improvement exercise will keep on deviating from its desired path. 2, identifying the current scenario and associated issues. In order to reach where you want to be, you must first assess where you stand. For example, a failure to see the real reason behind poor performance in compliance may affect profit and growth, and certainly your ability to do business in compliance and legally. At this stage, the person performing the gap analysis must organize brainstorming sessions, employee interviews, and document review sessions to gain insight into present challenges. Only after a comprehensive definition of present challenges can one get a clear picture. Number 3, devise an action plan. Now that you know the present and future expectations around internal controls, you can think of how many factors you will need to engage in the form of a plan, how you implement the action plan to close the identified gaps in your internal controls. The solutions may include a number of steps like hiring more employees, procuring additional processes and policies, etc. This leads us to reporting. A good gap analysis report usually presents a clear summary of where major gaps exist between a company's internal controls and the requirements that it wishes to fall upon. It also would show a detailed account of each requirement and the degree of compliance with each one of the requirements in the COSO framework, with corresponding actions to be taken to close those gaps. This is a major difference between an audit report, for example, and a gap analysis report. The gap analysis report has some inherent advice to it, which makes it suitable to be accomplished by outside experts or external consultants regarding controls specified under the COSO framework. A gap analysis will be performed by a company providing the certification, but only with sufficient conflict of interest issues resolved. So what does all this mean for the compliance practitioner? Basically, you have to come in and define what your goals are in your internal control gap analysis for compliance. You should take the COSO framework, map the 10 hallmarks of an effective compliance program to that, and then set out your internal controls under each of the points set out in the COSO framework. From there, identify the associated issues of where you want to be from where you stand. And by this, you will have a gap analysis, which will lead you to your third step of devising the action plan. The action plan will be critical for your internal controls because it's from this will be your roadmap on what controls to put in place. You may find that you have numerous controls in place, financial controls. You've considered them financial controls. Nevertheless, they're actually compliance internal controls. You can certainly utilize this to answer questions about any gaps. So what are today's 3 key takeaways about what is a gap analysis? Well, number 1, gap analyses are mainly a document review or a show me the evidence type activity because you're trying to determine what exists or what should exist. Don't forget it's a 3-stage process. You should accurately define the required changes, identify the current scenario and associated issues, and finally, devise your action plan. And finally, never forget, number 3, want to know not only where you stand, but where you're going to go. And this is really the beauty of the COSO framework that we're going to go into some detail on in later podcasts. Because the COSO 2013 Internal Controls Framework lays out for you with the 5 objectives, 17 principles, and 84 points of focus exactly what you need for a robust internal control system around compliance. This is Tom Fox. I hope you've enjoyed day 8 of 1 month to more effective internal controls, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow for day 9. This is Tom Fox again. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of 1 month to better internal controls. If you've listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would rate this podcast, as it would help in our rankings. The word out about the only 1 month podcast series, which enables you to design, implement, and enhance a better compliance program. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow.